What up, everyone? This is the Twice Over Film Club, and I'm your host, Faraz. Today we have our full episode on A Prophet. Hopefully you have listened to our preview episode and have seen the movie because this full episode does contain spoilers. Check out thetwiceover.com to see all the movies we have reviewed and how their tallies stack up in all the different variations. For example, A Prophet can be anywhere between a 77 or 86. So no doubt it's a good movie, but for you, depending on your taste, it might be a great movie. Also follow us on all the socials. That's where we make sure to keep you updated on what's on our watch list, and it's the easiest way to interact with us, so if you have any feedback or have any movie suggestions for us, just hit us up. Alright, so here's the episode with myself, Yusuf, and Fahad. Yeah, Yusuf, is this your first time watching it?
This is my first time watching it.
Ooh-wee. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on it.
I want to hear your thoughts.
Why I recommended it?
I mean, I'm gonna just admit to ignorance here. I feel like I'm missing a lot, and I just wasn't getting it. But just from a 10-second Google, you can see how many people are ecstatic about this movie. So I need to hear more. So it's
interesting. Really? Okay.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? A 10-second Google?
Yeah, I just looked at reviews, and it's mean, Ebert gave it 4 stars. Every major place gave it a good rating. Even Rotten Tomatoes, it has an 89 audience score. So it's not just critics. It's just I didn't see really much bad about it. So
gotcha.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's
not that I disliked it. It's just that is some high praise coming uniformly. So
right.
Okay. Well, Yusuf, I'll say this. I liked it 100 times more this time around. It went from me thinking it was a good movie to right now thinking it was masterful. I loved it. So maybe you need a second watch in 9 years.
Yeah, I'll let you guys know in 2029 if the world is still around at this rate. But I think maybe a second watch would help.
Did you appreciate it for the gangster movie that it was? Similar to Godfather or Goodfellas.
I think so. It's almost a mashup of a Goodfellas type movie and Shawshank. I felt there's some Shawshank influence coming.
Oh, for
in
sure,
here, but it's neither that story. It's neither story, right? It's neither the Goodfellas story. It's not the Shawshank story quite.
Because it's not. It's not sentimental at all like Shawshank.
Right, exactly. There's no sentimentality, and there's no the main character is just so different from Dufresne, right? So there's a lot of different treatment that you get to experience, but I felt just in terms of the tone and everything, there's kind of elements of both.
All right, so obviously we are talking about A Prophet, 2009 film. This is a foreign language film. I guess it's French/Arabic. It's a French production, though, directed by Jacques Audiard. Man, I wish I could do a French accent.
Jacques Audiard. I don't know.
There you go.
No, that was
it's not Jacques. It's definitely Jacques.
I think
Jacques.
The S's we can say pretty safely is not pronounced.
Okay, there we go. Fraz, you got it right.
Jacques Audiard. All right, we'll go with that. It's directed by him. Also, 2009, yeah. I didn't realize it was as old as it was. I don't know why. I thought it was a more recent film. The movie is about a very young 19-year-old Arab man who is sentenced to prison for 6 years. I'm not sure where in France. Is it somewhere in Paris, I think? I assumed it was Paris.
Yeah, I'm assuming near one of the major cities, right? It feels very urban.
Yeah, and he's more or less he's alone, this 19-year-old man. His name is Malik. He has no one really outside in the normal world. He doesn't know anyone in prison. He's kind of he's just on his own. And basically, we're gonna live through his experience in prison and how he gets by.
Mm-hmm. So with him being such a young character, this movie almost is kind of a coming of age story. Agree, disagree?
I think it qualifies actually.
Yeah.
As
Right?
it's not what you typically want to see in a coming of age movie, or it's just not what you expect to see.
Yeah.
Because of this is obviously just the subject matter is going to be much darker. But it is right. It is a coming of age story, and
It is, yeah.
it's you can't deny that there are plenty of people, young young adults in their teens, that this is how they grow up and this is how they get initiated into adulthood, right? It's not the prettiest thing. It's not the graduating from high school one last summer to capture our dreams.
Yeah.
Well, I would say coming of age is usually, the innocence of a person
Right.
being snatched away from them. And usually it's, not in circumstances like this where the innocence is being snatched away in prison.
Or I'd put it this way: most coming of age stories, they're very optimistic and happy and whatnot. This is just like bleak, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can see straight, like if you're just drawing parallels, it's like there always is kind of this like, like these horrible, there are these like outcomes that are looming on the horizon that you're afraid of, or are that are terrifying, but like the context or the magnitude of those is always like, oh, I'm gonna go off to college, me and my girlfriend are getting along, or whatever it is.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
the stakes are low,
being,
right?
Right, I'm being mean, but yeah, it's like the stakes are very low. This is like the same thing. I mean, there are the same elements at play, but the stakes are just much higher. And so I mean, I guess I feel kind of like I'm very emphatic about the fact that this should qualify as a coming of age movie. Like it has to, because like it just is that story for a population that probably doesn't I mean, this story gets told, but kind of the way this is told as a in that same vein as a coming of age story, I kind of like that look at it.
So you guys know I love coming of age stuff. And it'll be reflected in my score. Okay, so let's go on to our scores. We'll start with the narrative category. I'm gonna give this a 90.
I give it a 95.
90.
All right, so we all actually really like the narrative here. I mean, how did you guys weigh the direction?
Like the direction was excellent. So I want to get into the story a little bit, right? Is a story completely unique? No. Is a genre defining the story? No, right? But it's so well observed. Everything with the camera work and observing like prison life. I don't know. It's like a master class in like how we get to experience what Malik is going through.
I think there's like really good insight into what he's internally feeling, and they do a good job. The direction does a good job of making sure that's maintained on the screen in a lot of different ways. Story wise, I feel like it kept me on my toes. I mean, like I said, because they borrow from several different genres and it's kind of a mashup, I never really was satisfied that I knew where it was going, and I think in the end I really didn't. So I was intrigued the entire way through for that reason.
So yeah, for me the direction, like Fahad said, the story, it's not all that different from what you might expect from other prison type movies or crime related movies, but the direction is what made it really unique in terms of the presentation of the story. I thought was, I don't know another movie that presents it in such a gritty manner. And it says it really brought that score up, because again, the story is the story. It is engaging, but there's not too much substance to it really. It's really the direction that like amplifies.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of scenes where there's so much suspense built up, right? And it's relieved by like these scenes of violence, and then there's other scenes where it slows down and it turns into almost of a character story study, where it's like observing Malik's character like being turmoiled in prison. The pacing is great. There's never a dull moment.
I will say there. I personally wrote down that I thought there was a 15-minute segment towards the middle where I thought was a little dragged out.
Okay.
But I mean, it is a kind of long movie, right? It's like 2.5 hours.
It is. Yeah.
It's kind of long. I did think that there was a little moment where the story kind of was dragging to me.
Okay. I feel like I agree with you. I probably would go even further than you and say that I think there's a lot that they can maybe cut out. And I will pause and I'll say, like, maybe that's because I'm not seeing the threads coming together right now, and I would on a second viewing, or if I just have time to process it more, because there are elements that I feel like were introduced and then they didn't really do much with them, and it's kind of it's Chekhov's gun, right? If they're going to introduce elements, they should do something with those elements. Otherwise, they feel a little bit wasted in terms of the time spent exploring them and then not going, not bringing them to completion.
Are you referring to certain observations, or is it more so like something that could be a plot point? That doesn't. Okay.
Yeah, I think more so plot points. I'm sure there are observations as well, but I'm generally okay with that in movies when there's kind of there's kind of additional context put in through the dialogue and other stuff, right?
Gotcha.
I'm okay with that, but plot points that don't really tie in anywhere, that always feels like a little bit wasted to me. And I mean, would you guys agree with that or disagree with that? I mean, in a general sense, not specific to this movie, but do kind of loose plot points bother you?
Oh, they bother me, but I didn't see any with this one. Maybe later
same.
in the discussion we can get into specifics.
Yeah, like I said, maybe I'm just missing part of it here, and I'm totally willing to own up to that if I am. So, and I, like I said, I mean, I'm giving it a 90. So this is me kind of telling you what I didn't like out of something that I really pretty much did like.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the writing score here. I give it a 75.
I gave it an 85.
80.
Okay, so we're in a 10 score span.
This is, again, I just want to put the disclaimer that I put on pretty much every foreign film that we watch like this.
Exactly.
Yeah, bringing the proper tone and context into the dialogue is very, very difficult with subtitles. So we're kind of at the mercy of whoever produces the subtitles in order to do that for us, and a lot of it probably gets lost. And as an additional layer, this movie has at least 3 different languages that they speak in throughout this movie.
Yeah.
So that only, amps up the difficulty that much more. So, this movie might have been 100 and we just didn't get it. Also, it could have been a 60 and we got the benefit of some really good subtitles. I don't know.
Yeah, that's why
I have to agree with that.
Exactly, yeah. That's why I give it a 75. I thought it had to have been definitely a little better than average, but since I couldn't appreciate all of it myself, I went around to 75, kept it close to average.
Did you guys appreciate the little bits of comedy throughout the writing?
Yeah. I mean, there was some much needed comic relief.
Yeah.
Even though it was very brief when it happened.
Yeah, and I felt like they did a good job of, from my perspective at least, maintaining kind of the tone of the dialogue. Like there was just certain moments that I felt were a little bit more jovial, and like they made sure like just in the way that they it wasn't like just like it wasn't just straight translation in the subtitles. Like they did kind of work some
finesse into it, right?
Yeah, some emotion into it. So like I just remember there was a moment, and I'll mention this because it doesn't really mean anything, but he's trying to learn how to speak in French, and so he's kind of conjugating the different words, and then like basically somebody tells him to repeat after them or translate something that's like in like a very hoity-toity fancy kind of way of speaking.
Grammatically correct.
Yeah. He's like, would it were you that you did? And he was like, people actually say that? And the response he gets from the Riyadh, the guy he's talking to, is he's at least in the subtitles, he says, it's wild. I know. I never did say that, but they do. They really do say it. And like it really felt like you could feel the connection they were kind of making on an emotional level through the exact word choices that were chosen. Again, that's the subtitles. I don't know what the actual line was in the native language, but assuming that it was carried over properly, like I think that you do get a lot of that that depth into the dialogue. So we're viewing this through kind of an indirect means because we don't speak French and we don't speak Arabic or Corsican, right? But I do think that the depth was there in the dialogue from my perspective.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the acting. Here I give it an 85.
I give it a 90.
75 for me.
Ooh.
I thought
lowest score amongst us.
I thought the actor playing Malik, Tahir Rahim, was amazing. I also thought the guy playing Riyadh, what was that? Adil Ben Sharif. These guys played the part really well, and specifically to Tahir Rahim, he really reminded me of Robert De Niro from Godfather Part 2.
Oh,
the young De Niro. He was copying his mannerisms in every way, with the mustache, the way he would touch his face. I was like, dude, this guy probably watched that movie a million times to prepare for this role.
Not Taxi Driver, because there were overall similarities between the two movies, but that one. All right.
Yeah, Godfather Part 2 specifically, only because, again, it also fits the genre in a way.
Yeah. All right. I see it.
I mean, I think maybe I'm not low. I'm above average, but I'm certainly the lowest. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't actually love Tahar Rahim. That's the name, Tahar Rahim, right?
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily love his performance. I don't think he heard it. I actually did really like the performance by Adil Ben Sharif, right, for Riyadh. Also, the character that the actor that played Cesar Luciani, Niels Arstrup. I thought his performance was really good as well, but they weren't the main characters. So I mean, I did enjoy it, but I don't know. I guess I didn't feel like I got that much depth out of the acting, as much as from the dialogue and a lot of the cinematic choices. I didn't, not that I, and we'll talk about the cinematic choices, but I think there was a lot of emphasis in making sure you knew what was going on in his head, but I just didn't feel like it was coming from his acting necessarily, as it was, the director's heavy hand, which I thought was well used, but just trying to look at where I'm getting the perspective from, I thought it was coming mostly from elsewhere as far as what I really enjoyed about it.
You know what? I kind of agree. His Tahir Rahim's performance is a little bit enigmatic, right? He's kind of holding back. I think the reason why the director went with this choice, and the actor did as well, he's supposed to be like an empty canvas for us to like put our own emotions into, right? So at times when I was thinking, what is this guy thinking? What are his motivations? It engaged me more because I didn't know exactly what was going on with this guy.
Yeah,
he's a little mysterious,
right?
And I mean, the character himself is as well, because he has no real past either.
Yeah, we don't get to find out much about that, right? And he's kind of just very shy. And again, it's somebody who is, at least to a degree, finding themselves for the first time, right? Coming of age. So yeah, maybe there is kind of a lot held back because a lot of it is restrained. Like he's just a person that doesn't know or doesn't understand his emotions. He hasn't figured out who he is to a great degree. So yeah, there's a lot of that is like, it's like he's processing it in the moment. So he doesn't have a lot to say, or he doesn't have strong emotions to a lot of things outside of a few moments. I guess I kind of like that interpretation on it.
All right, we're gonna move on to the themes now. Here I give it a 70.
I give it an 80.
80 for me as well.
So yeah, this movie is pretty minimal on themes, right? It's mostly about the story. The reason I gave it a little bit of an above average score was it involves some themes with the coming of age story, and then a little bit of existentialist thought that we can get into later in the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one that I feel like that score may go up more and more the more I think about it. It's not your typical coming of age story, obviously, but it's also not the typical coming of age story thematically speaking. I think there is some really interesting context there that we'll dive into later, but I do think that they kind of have a different take on what that entails. So I liked it from that standpoint, and maybe the more I might think about it, I'll even go higher. But
yeah, as far as coming of age, that's clearly a theme. The way I identified it is by naming it identity, like self-identity. Conflict obviously is going to be a theme here as well. But yeah, we'll get deeper into it. But I gave it a pure average score only because it's not at the forefront of the movie. It's not unique. It's not different from what other movies of the same genre might present in terms of thematic elements.
Yeah, agreed.
I disagree a little bit, but
okay.
Fair enough. We'll talk.
All right, last category. Let's talk about aesthetics. Here I gave it a 90.
I give it an 85.
Hey guys, I gave it a 50.
Oh, what?
So we're the same group. We're the same group that did Lighthouse, right? And
yeah,
I shitted on the aspect ratio. This movie is a perfect example of how you can do confinement, claustrophobia without ruining an aspect ratio and keeping it widescreen.
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
Perhaps, but
that's not the only reason I went so high. But go ahead.
Yeah, you saw the aspect ratio was good, and you're like done with my aesthetic score. No, I mean I would say just while that may be true, it certainly doesn't deliver the amount of claustrophobia that the Lighthouse did, in my opinion, at least. I don't know that I appreciated a lot about the aesthetics. I thought, without going into it too much, I think I felt like there was a lot of different disconnected choices being made aesthetically speaking. So like a lot of different moments had totally different aesthetic choices, and I didn't really get that there was a strong reason for them to do that. So then it felt disconnected. And then secondly, I thought that the music choices were really strange. Not even that I disliked all of the music choices, just like that I just didn't think they med a lot of sense.
In terms of like fit, right?
Yeah, in terms of fit, exactly. And for example, I'll tell you, Faraz, you'll know better than I do. What's that Nas song that they use that kind of has the blues sample?
That's Nas and his dad.
I love that song. I really do love that song. I just didn't think it made any sense in that moment. And then there's a couple other choices like that. Like there's just some folksy music that comes out of nowhere, and then some other things. So again, maybe I'm missing something, but I thought that was really distracting. Even if I liked the music, I just didn't get why. So
I wasn't paying attention to the lyrics of the rap music, but I think the way it was used to like heighten the experience that Malik was feeling. Right, it was used when he was on the rise. When he's getting his business growing, his hustling or whatever. And that's when it was used. To me, it was jarring too because the choice in language, right? It's an English rap song and we're being taken out of,
a lot of English music, in fact, right?
Yeah. Well, so the only reason I didn't give this 100 is probably the choice of music or sound in general. I didn't have anything special about it.
You didn't like
I thought
the
visuals.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything specific about it, to be honest. But visually, I thought this movie was incredible. I thought the creative choices used by the director were great. Really, uncomfortable shots, very disorienting shots, a lot of handheld camera work. Even like the random use of slow motion. I just appreciated a lot of it. I thought it was.
And then those scenes where it's like, most of the frame is like vignetted, it's dark, and then you see a small perspective.
Yeah, it's like
right?
a spotlight.
Yeah. It's like hiding our focus, and it's like telling us like this is the only thing this character is able to see.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot to appreciate for the visuals here. I mean, in terms of like it gets graphic at sometimes, and it almost wants you to look away, but other times there's very specific scenes that we can talk about after the jump where all you want to know is like the context of the setting, but the director has chosen to cut off so much of the setting and only show you one like angle and so zoomed in, but all you're concerned about is what's actually off screen, and there's some very tense moments like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I mean, so to me, I guess like you guys are listing off a lot of different things that they were able to work with and that they were able to use in this movie, aesthetically speaking. I think I just want to see more reason behind it. So like I noticed all this stuff, but I was like, okay, they're doing a lot, but why are they doing a lot, or why are they doing things this way? So maybe that's why my score is a little bit lower. Again, I'll be happy to be talked out of it though. So that is certainly something that I want to dive into further.
What do you think of the camera work? Because at times it's like moving independently of Malik, and it's like it's handheld, and it's got like this voyeuristic eye. And what I mean by that, it's just like observing, It's
observing, but in a disoriented way. Is like how
you put it. Okay.
Yeah, basically that's how I even like was internalizing it. It's like I'm not supposed to totally be focused here. Like it's. Like there's something else that's taking your attention away that needs your attention as well. It's tricky. I thought it was very well done.
There were moments where it's almost like it feels like it's another prisoner in the room, the camera, that is, right?
Yeah.
And it's moving of its own volition, and it's kind of just it's in the moment. It's in one of these rooms with these other prisoners. I think I appreciated at least some components of it. Maybe I was a little bit harsh, but oh well.
All right, so as far as our overall tallies go, Fahad really likes this movie. His comes out to an 86, mine to an 82. Yusuf still likes it quite a bit. It's at 79. Our clear winner in terms of the which element was highest rated by us is the narrative. Then comes our acting. And then, I mean, other than the narrative, really, we're kind of middle of the road, average, slightly above average. Only like the narrative and the story and direction we thought was great.
I mean, but we're consistently above average on everything too. I think we're all within 5 or 10 on pretty much everything, other than aesthetics. So yeah, like I'm looking at my scores and like I'm high on everything about this movie other than aesthetics. Maybe not as high as you guys, but like I said, maybe I'm just like missing some context there. But really, like I think even for a first watch, like it was very engaging. For a movie that long, I'm surprised I wasn't more bored, even if I thought that there was some things that they could have done without. You really don't lose your attention, from start to finish.
That jump. Did you guys like the title things that come up where it's like the transitions and then like words pop up? It's like eyes and ears.
Yeah, the chapters, I guess.
No.
What?
I didn't really understand the purpose of that.
I don't know. I guess it's just like neatly wrapped up like a chunk of the movie. It's like eyes and ears. Okay, well he's learning, or it's like Ikra, and it's like okay he's learning or something. I don't know.
Exactly. Like it's not like they were all like okay. Some of them were
made
like
sense, some didn't.
Some of them were like, okay, he met this character and this character is significant. So then like there's like a whole chunk of the movie that's him interacting with this character. Other times it was just like, hey, it's Christmas, and it's like Christmas for like 5 minutes and then that's it. So why did they put that on there? It was just kind of interesting like when they chose to do that. That might be like a French thing, the big block letters on screen that kind of pop up out of nowhere and then disappear very quickly as well. For us, and Fahad, you've seen this movie too, I think, right? Incendies, they do the same thing, and that's a French-Canadian film, but it's clearly borrowing from the same space. That's another movie that takes place in.
But in that movie, it was much more like defined chapters, I thought.
Yeah, but exactly. So I think that's just kind of a tool that's like much more common in that cinematic world, right? So they just kind of they use it here. Maybe they don't use it the best here, but it's more common than it is for American movies. So like it's not surprising that they tried to use that here, even if it like was a little bit less consistent.
And also, since it is a longer movie, I think maybe subconsciously it just helps
break it up, right?
Yeah, it helps the pacing in a way.
Yeah.
Does it really pace it though when it's just like, hey, it's Christmas?
I mean,
it gives you like some context of time, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, it tells you that time has passed,
right?
Because there's only like one or two other moments where they actually like indicate passage of time.
I liked the other ways they did it a lot better than that, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
But you're right. Yeah, maybe that is kind of the. Nah, actually, I disagree. I don't think that was the purpose of saying it's Christmas. And I'm picking on that one because I thought that one was particularly absurd. But
I think the first title card, or whatever you want to call it, it comes where Riyadh reappears to him in his dream. They're wrestling.
Oh, Riyadh.
And then he wishes him happy birthday. Or 1 year.
To say that 1 year has passed, yeah.
Yeah, it's either his birthday or 1 year has passed. Maybe both?
It's congratulations on 1 year.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so in my head, I don't know which one it is, but yeah, your first instinct is to say, oh, it's the birthday, right? Because he even sings happy birthday to him in Arabic, right? But it's a much darker thing. It's a 1 year anniversary of perhaps him getting to the jail, or perhaps 1 year since he killed Rayab. I'm not sure. And those two things, those two events would be. Those two events would be, the second one's a lot darker, right? But those two events would be so close to each other in time anyways. But that was kind of the moment where his life kind of snapped, right? He had to decide, like, this is who I am now, only way I'm going to survive is if I do what they told me to do. And so, it's kind of like, congratulations, this is who you became. Happy 1 year, So that felt really dark to me. I really enjoyed that moment. And I really enjoyed the scenes with Rayab generally. The way he showed up and the way he's just kind of haunting him the entire movie.
Yeah, I definitely love that aspect of it. It's like a little bit of magical realism, right?
Yeah, so, okay. Let's kind of talk about the story here. So like we mentioned, he's a loner, more or less, Malik is. And when he gets into prison, he doesn't have anyone, inside or out. So is Corsican? Is that how I would say it?
Sure. I think that sounds right.
Corsician or anything weird like that, right?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, it's a region of France,
yeah,
right?
It's the
Corsica?
island south of France. I know.
Yeah, and for some context, it is the region, I don't know if you guys knew this, I certainly didn't, but I kind of figured it out as it was going. Corsica is a region that is, they're a little bit separate from France. I mean, they've been controlled by France for quite a while, but they've maintained like a strong Italian culture, right?
Yeah, I think they're ethnically different, right? Culture-wise, language is different, values are different, right? Everything like that.
And so this leads to the issue where a guy like Malik, who is a descendant of Arabic descent, right? But he is from Corsica, right? Neither claim him, right? The Arabs see him as a Corsican, and the Corsicans see him as an Arab. And
wait,
so
is he from Corsica?
I thought so, because they refer to him as the Corsican, but maybe that's just because he works for them.
Yeah, the
I don't know
association.
because this works for them. I think he's just a Arab in Paris.
Yeah.
So you think he's from Paris then?
Yeah, he's just a French Arab.
Okay, I kind of interpreted it that he's probably got some background from there, because he seems, even at the beginning, he seems like he has some commonality with them. But maybe that was in my head. But the point is basically that he ends up in a position where he belongs in neither place anymore, right?
Yeah, and he isn't given much of a choice. So right away, like you mentioned, Rayab's murder, right? It's not much of a choice by him. The Corsican mafia, basically, they come up to him and say, there's this person that you need to kill for us. Now that you know this, you have to do it. If you don't do it, we kill you. So his hands are tied. He has to do it basically to save his own life. And he does kill Rayab very brutally, probably one of the most brutal scenes in like cinema I've seen. They don't like hold anything back here. They just show you everything.
They torture you with having to witness that scene. They make you feel guilty being in that same room.
Yeah, for sure.
But building up to that murder, right? There's moments where Malik is trying to get out of this murder, right? He kicks a dude to get sent to solitary. Kind of a smart action, but then the Corsicans, the leader, he's like,
Cesar.
Yeah, he knows what he's up to. He's like, you think you could get out of this just by getting sent to solitary, and he beats him up. And then there's also that moment where Malik tries to confide in the warden, right, to get it to him, but then the Corsicans intercept him again, right?
Yeah. With the bag.
With the bag, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's so clearly Malik doesn't want to carry out the murder. I mean, why would he? It's not. It sounds like he's in prison for like some assault against some police officers,
which he denies.
The only reason he has a 6-year sentence is because they inferred that he's, had multiple
run-ins with the law, right?
Yeah, multiple run-ins priors. So basically, he's at that point where any next crime will get him significant time, which is the situation he's in. And he even says it like, muttering to himself, like, I can't kill a person, like I can't kill a man.
Mm-hmm.
And the choice of weapon and how they want him to kill him is like with the razor blade in the mouth, take it out and like slice his jugular while pretending or in seducing
Go
him.
on. Yeah, I was gonna say
seducing
get it out.
him to give him a blowjob, because Rayab is, and basically Rayab says, "I'll give you hash if you suck me off," and obviously Malik does not want to do that, but since he has no choice, like that's his in to get close to Rayab and to basically do the murder.
Continue walking us through the plot. I kind of want to get that out there. That's obviously kind of the big centerpiece moment, and I think maybe I enjoyed the movie from there on out, like even more. So,
and I actually paused the movie. This happened like in the first 20 minutes, like the whole sequence of him getting recruited to do the murder and to commit the murder. Like it happened very fast. So like you were mentioning, Yusuf, the engagement level is like off the charts for a long movie because it gets you really early and then you stay engaged throughout. All right, so what happens after? Basically, the Corsicans, they do take him in as protection. So the prison is broken up into two segments. You got the Arabs and Muslims, and then you have the Corsicans. And again, the Arabs, he doesn't know any of them, even though he himself is Arab. And he isn't like a religious Muslim or anything like that. So he doesn't go naturally towards the Arabs in prison. He's just on his own. That's why the Corsican mob like approached him in the first place. And then since he does carry out the murder, the Corsican's like, all right, cool, we're gonna have you under our protection. But basically, he is at their service. He does whatever the Corsican mafia is telling him to do in prison.
And they remind him of that pretty regularly, right? So I mean, he's pretty much their lapdog. It's nothing glorious, he cleans up after them, and that's about it.
They mention like derogatory Arab like slurs against him all the time.
Yeah,
to remind him like, hey, you're not a Corsican, you're Arab.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, he's constantly being reminded that he's not one of them, and I think that triggers like an identity crisis with him, right?
Okay, so you mentioned that who mentioned that the Riyadh hallucinations, I guess is what I would call them, that he was having, Malik was having. I actually really appreciated those scenes as well. I thought that was moments where we kind of saw, I mean, initially he's frightened. I think the first like vision he has is like him fighting in bed with him. Like, and then going forward though, he's almost finding comfort in him. Like, like having someone there with him.
Yeah, he's almost like a confidant, right? And
exactly. He's confiding in him. Especially when he's like in solitary, he's actually like asking for him, like, "Are you here?"
Yeah, and I think that at that moment he disappears when he's finally in solitary. I think because at that point he's his own man.
So basically, he's learning the trade of the prison, right, by serving the Corsicans, and in doing so, he also joins classes, he's functionally illiterate. He can't actually read or write. I mean, he can write his name, but he joins classes, learns to read and write. There he meets a friend, Riyadh, who actually becomes a very close friend of his. And through Riyadh, he actually ends up, he gets an opening to the other Muslims and the Arabs in prison as well. So at this point, Malik has both camps of the prison, or he has an inn under both camps, and he kind of has some protection from both ends as well due to his friend Riyadh and then due to Cesar and the Corsicans. In this position that he's in, which is a very unique position, he's able to understand the workings of prison in and out from both segments, and he basically starts taking advantage of it for his own personal gain, right? Now, I'm not entirely sure exactly what happens next. Well, Riyadh gets out of prison, right? He gets out of prison because he has testicular cancer.
Right.
And that's now Riyadh becomes his window to the outside world.
Right. And two things kind of happen simultaneously, more or less. One is that, right? Riyadh is outside and can help him from the outside. The second is that a bunch of the Corsicans get released from prison or transferred to a Corsican prison, which was like a political move that was made. But Cesar gets left behind because, for reasons we don't really know, but his crimes
He's like more high-level crime, pretty much.
Exactly, yeah. So the charges against him were of a degree that he didn't get that, that mercy that the others did. So he's stuck here, and he's only got a few of his, of his men with him. And in that role, Malik is kind of able to swoop in and kind of play a larger role for him, even though he's still kind of degraded, and it's clear that the Corsicans kind of resent him, but he is able, because he's kind of picked up how to speak some Corsican. He gets to be kind of this confidant to Cesar as well.
Yeah, and then he has this other friend too in prison who is the drug dealer, the one who provides the hash. And I think even cocaine, or is it
heroin?
Meth? I'm not sure. Or heroin, yeah. So through this connection, like he has the drug connection, he has the mafia connection with the Corsicans, and then he has the connection to all the Muslim gangs through the Muslims, or the Arab gangs, maybe I should say. Through that, he's able to build a business enterprise by hustling drugs, both outside of prison and into prison. Not just drugs, but I think like all kinds of, I don't know, paraphernalia that you can't bring into prison, he's able to bring in. And in doing so, obviously his reliance on Cesar becomes less and less. And we kind of reach this climax of the story where he has an in to one of the bigger Arab gang leaders outside through Cesar, because Cesar actually wants to make like a peace deal with him so they could work together in terms of business. But basically Malik goes directly to him and says, I'll work with you, and we can leave Cesar behind. And he kind of does this on the other side with another Muslim gang, or like Latif the Egyptian. He does it with him as well. And he's able to basically shore up his enterprise.
There's so many plot points, right?
Well, I mean, let's just wrap up the story kind of in a couple sentences, and then we'll move on.
Yeah. So once his enterprise is shored up, like Riyadh, unfortunately, his cancer comes back. He stops doing chemotherapy because he says it's useless at this point. He asks, he doesn't really ask. He basically says, Malik, you're gonna be the caretaker of my wife and son, and
the Godfather.
Malik is he's the Godfather, which obviously ties into the theme of the movie, kind of. And Malik has been he's owning the prison, like inside and out, like the guards and everything. And when he is released, he basically walks out of prison, he sees his entire enterprise waiting for him. All the drug dealers, the gangs, they're all waiting for him in like these fancy, luxurious cars. And then there's Riyadh's widowed wife and his young son. He decides to just go with them and start walking, and the film ends there.
And he motions to his caravan behind him to he waves him off. He's like, I'm not interested in that. I'm a family man now. He's like straddling the line.
I'm not sure about
that. No.
I'm not sure if he's not interested in the...
It's not that. It's like he's straddling both worlds, right? He can be both. Yeah. It's just like he wants to be with her in this moment.
So as I just mentioned, kind of ends on a good or happy note for Malik. Like he ends up successful. Now, what did you guys think of that? Like it all stems from the murder that he commits. That when he kills Rayab is when this all starts, right? For a protagonist who commits a horrible crime, in a very brutal way, and again, like we said, a very graphic nature, and how they showed it was also just grotesque. How did you feel about, because we do end up kind of rooting for him, right? We want him to be successful. We want him to win, despite what we saw him do at the very beginning.
Right. He's like almost the perfect anti-hero, right? How'd you guys feel about Breaking Bad? I don't know, it's a little bit of a segue, but Breaking Bad's lead character, other anti-heroes, are you able to root for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that you build around an anti-hero can generally, it obviously leads you to root for them, without a doubt. Mentally, I was rooting for Walter White in Breaking Bad, but I think he is more clearly an evil person in the end than Malik here, because there's just a clear difference between a guy who does something like that out of pure necessity for pure survival, fully not believing he can even pull it off, and then is haunted by that memory for the next how many ever years. You know what I mean? Yeah. So although he morphs into a totally different person, it's obviously the environment that does that to him, not something of his own accord. So I think from that standpoint, I found it much easier to root for him in this movie than other anti-heroes, I guess.
Yeah. And on top of that, there's moments where Malik is very endearing. It's like when it's in that airplane scene where he's looking out the window like an excited kid on his first flight. That one, his first moment outside of prison, it's like he's elated to be outside prison. He's observing everything. And then there's also that moment where he's back in prison after having visited the beach, and he pours out that sand, and he's kind of reflecting on the memory of having spent a day on the beach, right? It's those moments.
And just like he seems like a genuinely nice guy to people who are nice to him.
Yeah.
So like when Riyadh gets kidnapped by Latif the Egyptian, he doesn't hesitate to say, forget the cash, forget the dope, let's get Riyadh back, just let that other stuff go. He doesn't, and again, it is kind of easy to root for him despite the murder of Riyadh, is because he was backed into a corner. Like, we give him that excuse, like he had no choice. It was either his life or Riyadh's life.
Yeah.
So,
but there are more troubling murders down the road, right?
There are.
Yeah.
Well, how many more? There's what other murder except for the very end?
The one on the streets of Paris, right?
Yeah, that's it, right? The bodyguards.
Uh-huh.
Well, okay, so let's talk about this. This is the Iqra chapter. Obviously, well, we're Muslim, so we kind of have some context here. I don't know how a non-Muslim would have read into this chapter, but obviously the title of the movie is called A Prophet. This is when we see Malik go from being, at the service of Cesar and the Corsican mob, or at the service of the drug trade or whatever, to being like his own man. So that chapter, Iqra, starts with the hallucination that he's having with Rayab in the prison cell, and basically Rayab recites like that verse from the Quran,
mm-hmm.
and then he goes in the next day, or goes out, I should say, of prison next day. He gets like the daily leaves, right? So he goes out and he kills the bodyguards, but not the actual target, because he basically wants the two factions to war against each other, right? Cesar and his mob, and then his name was Jackie something.
Yeah, let's back this up a little bit. So, essentially when he does that deal with Brahim, right?
Yeah.
There's discussion that there is a snitch within the Corsican mob that is working with the Italians, right? And he says, you gotta deal with that, right? And although Malik doesn't even seem that interested in carrying out whatever Cesar initially had in mind, but when he goes back, Cesar is certainly questioning about who is the snitch, we need to find out who that is, and he's questioning his people, and he's telling his boss Markaji, right, Jackie Markaji,
mm-hmm.
He's telling him that we need to deal with this problem one way or another now. Markaji's not really budging. He's not that concerned, and that's causing some friction there. So eventually Cesar sends Malik out and says, "You're gonna kill my boss, Markaji," right? At this point, Malik is more of a individualized person, right? He's formed some sort of identity, so he doesn't just do what he was told like he did throughout the movie. And there's kind of good parallels where people keep asking him, what are you doing, why are you working for them, what do you do for them, and he just says, I just do what I'm told. They tell me to do it and I do it. Like, he says that multiple times.
He says, I'm working for myself.
Yeah, so he kind of draws a distinction there, right? Like, he always points out that no, like, they don't own me, I'm working for me. I do what they tell me to, but that's for my benefit because I'm self-employed, right? That's kind of the way that he puts it. So yeah, in this moment, he kind of decides to veer off of Cesar's plan, and instead of killing Markaji, he basically kills his bodyguards, kidnaps him, and then tells him that Cesar sent me, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to leave the next move up to you. And it does exactly what he wanted it to, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the next scenes we see in prison, it's just a bloodbath of assuming that Markaji basically believed Malik and then went ahead and ordered hits on all of the remaining men that Cesar had in prison.
It basically dwindles Cesar's power to nothing in prison, and who's the new leader or the godfather of prison now is Malik.
Yeah, more or less. And now he's joined with the Muslim faction, right? And he's kind of entrenched with them.
Mm-hmm.
But now Cesar can't touch him. And one thing I really liked about that sequence is, Fahad, you mentioned going back to the beginning, Malik thinks that if I just get myself put in solitary, nobody can, bother me, and they can't make me murder Rayab, right?
Yeah.
But Caesar has too much power. He has the guards under his thumb, and they don't send him to solitary to make sure that he's there and they have access to him. At the end of the movie, or towards the end, right, when this whole thing happens with the hit on Markaji that goes off the rails, instead of going back to prison, he waits a day so that he's late, and he does it so that he knows that he's going to be sent to solitary for over a month, which means that all of that time that there's going to be that conflict between the groups, all those murders that happen, he's neatly tucked away where nobody can touch him, right? Mm-hmm. And so like that's kind of the turning point where you see that like Caesar no longer has the power that he did earlier on, and Malik knows it and takes advantage of it.
And the other brilliant thing is that Caesar isn't able to interrogate Malik if he's in solitary, right? When Malik finally gets out and Caesar sees him in the prison
courtyard.
Yeah, there's he doesn't seem to understand that Malik was the one who betrayed him. And then that there's a great scene where he has this look of betrayal and everything. But yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to ask, so this whole talk about there's a snitch among the Corsicans, I mean, who is the snitch, or was there one? What was the deal with that in the end?
I'm not sure if it mattered, right? If there was one, they probably got him with everyone dying in prison. Or was it?
Right, and it was kind of so assuming that there was such a large turnover in the employment, right? So whoever it was, they were naturally dealt with, and it's kind of immaterial who it is. I guess that's one explanation, but I wasn't sure if I was like missing it and it was there.
Do you think Caesar suspected his boss of being the one working with the Italians, and that's why he ordered that hit?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's kind of the thing that was popping in my head, because sure. Markaji seems so hesitant to deal with it, and he keeps putting Caesar off.
Yeah,
and so that's kind of a tell that either Markaji is the snitch or he knows who it is, and it's it's under his control.
So do you remember that scene with his lawyer, Caesar and his lawyer?
Which one?
Which one? A few of them.
So when the lawyer's telling him that his bosses won't make a move to flesh out the snitch, that they don't care.
Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking of, because Caesar's getting so aggravated in that moment, and he says something like, "I don't care what he wants; he needs to deal with it now." And basically, Markaji obviously was not budging, so that's very suspicious, right?
Yeah, and then there's that moment where the lawyer transitions into good news, and Caesar picks up on it. It's like everything you've been telling me has been bad news, so he instantly suspects him, because he's a very smart dude, right? So he knows that there's something up there.
Well, is that lawyer, is he also the lawyer for Markaji, or is he just like a middleman, like messenger? I guess I assumed messenger.
Yeah, I think he's doing a little bit of everything.
I assumed he was like the mob, the attorney for the mob. So he doesn't really have loyalty specifically to any of the specific members, except whoever's at the top of the chain, which would be Markaji.
Should we get back into the sloppy assassination? Like, what's the purpose of that? Such a gritty and gruesome scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I thought the value of that was it was so visceral, right? It's like a gut punch to the viewers, where we're supposed to be left shell-shocked almost, and we're supposed to take on this perspective of Malik, right? And it's something that we can't escape. It's something he can't escape, and so it kind of forces us to relate more to Malik.
I think so.
Force us to relate to him. I think it's more like an introduction into the world that Malik is in now. That's how I read it. Like, he is in a world where like death is around the corner, and he needs to like have his guard up all the time, and like this is the kind of things he's gonna have to deal with like for the next 6 years if he wants to survive.
Yeah, but I think part of it was also the fact that like, how corny would it have been if he just pulled off the perfect, assassination right there, right? He does it so sloppily because he doesn't know who he is, right? And he certainly doesn't think he's capable of this. And so he barely is. He gets away with it. Why? Because Caesar cleared out the entire wing of the prison, to make sure that he had the privacy to do it. Riyadh is screaming at the top of his lungs. There's blood everywhere. It gets all over his shirt. He has to run back to his cell to clean it up. Like, it's a straight mess. He doesn't do anything right. But that's kind of his rebirth, right? So he just kind of nothing goes according to plan, and it's very messy, right? That's kind of the way I saw it.
Yeah.
Ooh, rebirth. What a visual.
There was a lot of blood.
A lot of blood.
And then even as he's laying there dying, he's like flopping on the ground.
Dude, and the noises, like they don't
hold back,
censor anything. Yeah, they don't hold back at all.
Yeah, like that was like a very realistic, raw depiction of somebody basically.
Usually, like that kind of violence is not depicted on screen.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we just did No Country for Old Men, right? I think that was another movie that kind of did it similarly. In fact, they shied away from showing you some of it, but in terms of kind of the rawness of it, that was very similar. So yeah, I mean, I think that is very intentional, kind of to make you stop and think, whoa, like they're not glorifying it as much as they are just showing you the way it is.
So when I talked about how the director very deliberately chose when to show something and when not to show something, so clearly this murder of Rayab was something he wanted us to see, despite like how graphic it was. But the other use of his camera work was keeping things off screen to build anticipation. And one example of that, like we talked about when Malik was going up to kill the bodyguards in the armored SUV. When he gets out of the van, so one of the bodyguards gets out to like buy cigarettes or something, and Malik is like, "I'm gonna go now." And Riyadh's like, "What, are you crazy?" But only Malik goes. Riyadh doesn't. Riyadh is still like he's still back like behind the car, and as Malik is walking up to the car, we're only seeing Malik. We're not seeing anything else, and we're seeing just like his body in the frame, but nothing like to the side of him. Like there's cars to the side of him, so you can't really tell where he is in terms of context of where the SUV is that he needs to get to. We can't see where the bodyguard is that's buying cigarettes and when they're gonna come back out. And like we only meet, the bodyguard when Malik himself meets him. And to that build to that anticipation and then that payoff was incredible. And then even the use of slow motion in the car I thought was great.
Yeah, he's laying there in the bottom of the car, right? And the camera's just looking at him and he's smiling as bullets are whizzing by.
Yeah, man, that was just some great camera work, great direction, amazing aesthetics, amazing visuals.
And also kind of wrapping up that scene, he's basically dragging Markaji back to their van, right? And Riyadh is screaming at the top of his lungs to him. But as the viewer, you can't hear a damn thing he's saying. It's because Malik can't, right? He's literally like, dude, like I just had a million bullets whizzing past my ears. I can't hear anything. So he's just screaming back.
I really like that.
I don't know what you're saying. I don't know. Yeah, they kept it very realistic. And so
movies never do that, right? Guns are freaking loud, and yeah, that was awesome.
I do want to ask. I mean, so in that moment, basically, he just picks a spot. He's like, all right, I'm getting out of the car and I'm going. And it ends up being timed perfectly, where just as the bodyguard is coming back and opens the door to the SUV, that's right when Malik is passing by the SUV. So he jumps in there and he's able to shoot them. Otherwise, none of that gets, none of that succeeds because he needed to have that door opened for him. That was the only way it was going to happen. So to me, that wasn't pure coincidence, right? I mean, that was the last of several cues that he has some sort of prophetic abilities, right? And they don't really hide this. It's not like I'm pulling this out, right? It's the name of the movie. They mention, prophetic verses just a little bit before then, and then there's actually some literal scenes where he's predicting the future that we get to see. So I mean that's not something that's hidden. So right, so in that moment, the fact that he picked the perfect moment, that's kind of his innate sense because he's some sort of prophet, right?
Yeah. So like it's weird, right? He has this innate sense of where to be and what time to be, right? Perfect time and perfect place. But that's kind of like how he got into prison too. So it was almost necessary for him to. I don't know. The exact circumstances of how he ended up in prison aren't clear, but for him, obviously, it was unfortunate, right? And he couldn't see why. I don't know what point I'm trying to draw. It's like you don't see what's ahead in your life, but it's almost necessary, and you have to go through those trials or whatever.
Maybe, but so I mean, part of it is that part of the contradiction there, though, is that he does see what's ahead. He's a prophet, and he literally sees what's ahead in several scenes.
We know when it's a dream sequence, right?
Yeah.
Where the camera work is like that. It's like, it's not really slow. It's like stop motion almost, right? And he has that one vision of like deer in a dream. We assume it's a dream because a previous dream used that same stop motion type visual.
Right.
So yeah, he sees a bunch of deers. He sees like the deer sign, whatever, on the road. And then when he's with Brahim, right, in the south of France, he sees, like, he has a gun pointed at him because Brahim is like interrogating him, saying like, I had a friend, Rayab, in prison. Do you know what happened to him? And he sees the deer sign. And he says, there's an animal coming. And what do you know? A deer comes and like crashes into the car, and
Brahim forgives him.
And that's when Brahim's like, what are you? Are you a prophet? Like, that's where like the title comes in, right?
So that whole thing where he's like, are you a prophet? That felt kind of unimaginative to me. I don't think they should.
Same.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is what I wanted to bring up, because I agree 100%. And there's a couple other scenes. There's a scene earlier where he's just kind of looking out into the yard from his prison cell, and he's calling out what each prisoner in the yard is about to do. And I think it's actually Rayab's ghost over his shoulder who's calling it out. But that's obviously in Malik's head, right? So he's just kind of, he's predicting every move, right? So there's only a couple moments there in terms of the prophecy, and I didn't get why they were necessary. And I don't want to just say like, man, that they should have just cut that out, because it's also kind of the title. So like, tell me what that is supposed to mean. They only have a couple moments like that, right? We've listed 3 if we include the attack on Markaji's car, where he times it perfectly. That's kind of 3 prophetic moments. What's going on? What are we supposed to take away from that?
So I think he's like an astute observer, right? That's the kind of person he is. He's quiet, he's shy, but he's constantly aware of what's happening. And so maybe this is a little high level. The whole thing about the last chapter being called Iqra was kind of weird to me. But right, what is that in the Islamic theology? It's the start of the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, right? It's when he goes from being an ordinary person to being a prophet. This is kind of like when Malik goes from being an ordinary person to, or not an ordinary person, but like a person with no identity to someone who has now found himself. Now, those prophetic scenes, I just chalk them up to being,
Would you like to explain them away and just say like he's in his head? Because like literally he predicts that the guy is about to dunk the ball, which like is not a leap, right?
No, that's not exactly the prison. Like when he's watching over the prison yard and they're playing a game of basketball. He's seen them do this a million times. He knows that dude with the ball is gonna dunks the ball. He knows that guy who's jogging does push-ups. He's seen them do it before. Like that's not anything special in terms of the his intuition to leave the car and see like, this is my chance to go and kill those bodyguards, get in the car. Again, it's just, in my opinion, it's just an intuition thing, and him timing it properly. We couldn't see the bodyguard coming out of the store, but he could. He was walking towards the car, and he could probably easily see where the bodyguard would come from. And why would the bodyguard think anything of this random dude walking down the street?
I suppose, so even if you don't even go that far to explain like how he timed it perfectly, like he was going to make something happen, right? And so he just kind of he
was determined to do something.
Yeah, his determination kind of gets it done. Maybe there's obviously an element of luck there.
Is like that deer one.
Exactly. That's the one I can't explain away, because not only does it end up being true, but then, Brahim calls it out afterwards, and it's kind of the reason that he gets in with Brahim, right? I think, like, okay, let's say we cut out all of those moments, right? Like, and, essentially they're all just coincidence or whatever. There's no kind of prophecy going on. That one moment with the deer, if they just removed that and just had him tell Brahim to his face that he does say, he's like, I'm the one that did Rayab, right? He tells him that, but he tells him after the whole deer incident. Like almost that alone would have been enough basis to kind of, to to kind of get that relationship rolling. I don't know. I thought we could have just done without the whole prophecy aspect, but I do like kind of the spin you put on it, where it's kind of somebody learning their identity. I think I can appreciate that.
The dream sequence too, maybe, like, do we have to accept that it's a real dream that he's having, or is it just something we're seeing as an audience? Like,
I think he has to be having it. I mean, why else would we see it otherwise, right?
Think. Yeah, no, I agree. Especially because, again, they use that same visual for which is a previous dream when he's fighting with Riyadh in his like first hallucination of Riyadh.
Right. Yeah, that's very early on, right? We see that. Yeah. I don't know what. It's basically all the shapes are kind of flowing into one another, right? You called it stop motion, but it's something like there's the animation is very flowy.
It's like a strobe light going off, right?
Yeah.
So you only see like flashes of the scene because it's going on and off.
Yeah, I'm sure there's like a name for that type of animation because it's very common and everyone would know it when they see it. But like I don't have a word for it. But in any case, yeah, those are probably the dream moments. I don't know that I loved that choice. I mean, it felt very choppy to me. I think it felt so different and so out of place. But I mean, on the other hand, it was effective because it tells you what mind space that is going on in, right? That it's not real and it's not a hallucination, but it's something else. It's him when he's subconsciously or when he's like asleep. He's just kind of, that's what he's seeing, and he's not able to interpret it, but obviously when the moment comes, it clicks for him, right?
Yeah.
Fahad, I was gonna say, I know you said you didn't feel like anything was dragged out. The 15 to 20 minutes that I thought were kind of dragged out is when Malik has started building that enterprise and they're kind of showing his rise in prison in more like in a what is it called, in a sequence of like
montage,
scenes, right? It's not really a montage. There you go. Like that was just, I don't think you needed to do that. It kind of didn't fit with the rest of the movie in terms of like pace and tone either.
Yeah, so it was like
those were like 10 minutes maybe you could have given back. I don't know.
I think it injected some energy into it. Well, if it without it, maybe it would have gone dull. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know if I would have thought it was dull, but I can see people feeling like that.
I mean, I thought they were using those montages to kind of get the energy rolling again. I mean, to me, that's a little bit less organic because, like, for example, when the Nas song hits, I actually loved that sequence, but I mean, it was really energetic, but it's because of the song. So they're kind of they're feeding you the tempo there. And that whole sequence seemed a little bit like a rap video. I don't know if you guys noticed, but like there's that shot of all the cooks in the kitchen just kind of staring at the camera, like breaking straight through the fourth wall and just looking at you. That's like it's a very similar shot to like what you see in like rap videos and stuff. So there's like little moments like that where they just like they dove into a particular style.
Mm-hmm.
Like they made very stylistic choices for a short sequence, and then moved on from it. So I think that's kind of where I felt like some of the cinematography was a little bit inconsistent.
Sure, no, I agree with you.
And I'm piling this on along with kind of the animation and the different. They'd use a few different things in terms of kind of the type of. I don't know what to call it. Basically,
like the spotlight, like
the
shots.
tunnel vision. Yeah.
Yeah, the director was pretty creative in terms of using a diverse range of like visuals to present the movie. It wasn't, and like I agree. Some of it kind of may have felt out of place, especially doing like the montages. Specifically, that's the only time I thought it took me out of the movie. Otherwise, I really appreciated all the choices he made.
Guys, remind me when the Iqra scene comes up.
It's the night before he goes to kill the bodyguards and like,
okay. So what I remember about that, right? The chapter preceding it, it's about Riyadh, him telling Malik that he's going to die, that he needs to be the caretaker of his family. And then I remember the music choice was like kind of somber, and it kind of wraps up by the time that Iqra scene happens.
Is it like that folk song that Yusuf mentioned? I think that's what
the
it
folk
was.
Song?
Yeah, I think so.
It was an English language song, which was also kind of weird to me.
Yeah. But the point I was trying to get through to was, I don't know, I guess the Iqra thing was like finished off that chapter for me, where it's like Malik's questioning, what am I doing in prison? Like, what goal am I trying to achieve? So I think his priorities shifted there when his friend told him he's going to die. He needs to be responsible for them, right?
Like he has a purpose now, right? And that's kind of consistent with like the weight of prophecy, right? The responsibility of that, of that change. So so obviously we keep saying it's a coming of age story, right? So obviously there is a little bit of that going on here, but what I thought they did really effectively was show a coming of age for someone who really doesn't have an identity, right? And I don't mean the awkward, quiet nerd who is trying to figure out his passion in life. I mean, this is a guy who needs to survive by aligning himself with someone, anyone, right? And is unable to do so, and kind of he develops this, what in modern day and age we call code switching, right? His life is kind of code switching. He's just he has to learn how to align himself with the Corsicans. He has to learn how to align himself with the Arabs and what buttons to push in which situations. And he learns, although they're kind of still they don't fully accept him because they can see what he's doing, right? But his life is kind of like that. He has to learn how to be in all these different situations in order to survive. And so he doesn't have an identity because of that, because it's controlled by situationally. And eventually he's able to find his identity, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're talking about towards the end, he has responsibility and he's able to make his own choices. And that's kind of his coming of age. That's kind of what I saw from this. And even the outcome is it's one last kind of switch in his mentality. He has to turn one more switch and turn into a different person again. But he's able to kind of find purpose in that. So I thought that was kind of a different take on what you'd normally see in terms of coming of age. Also in terms of prison, I think maybe the idea of adapting to that environment is always there, but I thought this was a little bit more unique than that.
Yeah, I think you hit all the points right on the head, because the self-identity crisis is the self-identity and innocence, mm-hmm. and losing of that innocence and finding that identity is exactly what like coming of age is about. Mm-hmm. So the only other theme that was kind of a little different was guilt, and we kind of touched on it with the murder of Riyadh. He definitely has guilt, like he feels guilty for having done that, despite like him not really having much of a choice in doing so. And I think that's presented very well with the hallucinations that he has. And initially, maybe he's haunted by the visions, but later on, like Fahad said, he's almost confiding in him.
Yeah.
And we kind of see how his relationship with that guilt kind of evolves over time, right? So at the beginning, we get like that birthday scene was really truly haunting in terms of just the level of guilt and the level of darkness that he was feeling, right? But then as that relationship goes on, I mean, Riyadh is constantly hanging around and just haunting him, and it begins to turn into something of a companion, right? He confides in him, and like it's as if they're sharing they're sharing stories and they're sharing about one another. Of course, this is probably all going on in Malik's head, so all the stuff that we're getting from Riyadh may not be true at all, right? But he's kind of got that relationship with it, and then it evolves to the point where at the end, when he's in solitary confinement, Riyadh's not there, and he kind of falls asleep peacefully when he's not being haunted by Riyadh, but he keeps waking up and he's like, "Is it you? Are you there? Are you there?" And then he goes back to sleep, and it's almost like he's missing him at that point, right? Because that was the one companion he had for so long. But now he's kind of, I don't know. I guess he's also grown past that guilt at that point. Maybe because of the gravity of all the other things that he's done, where like that's no longer the big thing weighing on his conscience. I'm not sure if maybe that's what they're trying to convey, or just the fact that now that he has an identity, he's no longer kind of at the whims of the things that happen to him.
I like that reading.
Yeah, so I took those visions also to be somewhat where that's where Malik is having a time for self-reflection, and again, once you are more comfortable in your identity and you know who you are at this point, he doesn't need that anymore. So that's just another reason why Riyadh no longer shows up.
Yeah. Do you guys want to get into Luciani and what was going on with him with his decline, right? He sees most of his gang leave prison, and he's the lone person left behind. In that scene where he realizes he's not getting out, he's like, he's sitting on his bed. He's like all sad and depressed, and he's kind of more reflective, right?
Yeah, you kind of see a change in his mood. He kind of senses that his time is more or less up. And I think that's kind of feeds into his power move to want to kill his boss. Because he doesn't have, I mean, obviously any villain like this, any person who's running a mob is addicted to power and control. And he kind of sees that slip away, especially, and it just accelerates when I mean, it already has slipped away that he's in prison in some sense, but then even within prison, he sees it go away when all of his confidants get released or get transferred to another prison. And I think most of them get released because they come back to visit him, especially on Christmas. So I thought it was a good character. He was a good villain. I mean, he's clearly the antagonist here, but there's something about like really old people playing like these really evil, strong man type villains, and it's just like, dude, just push him over. He's old and frail. Like, it doesn't. I don't buy into it. It's
just
like,
knock him over.
He can't beat you up, dude. His punch is not gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
Well,
come on now. Just punch back.
I would say two things to that. One, just the fact that Luciani is fairly generic as far as villains go, right? Like we don't get much background, but you don't need the background for him, right? You know what he is. He's a kind of a mob boss, and that's all you really need to know about him. But there is kind of that element of like, why is anybody afraid of him? And I think the answer is in the juxtaposition with Malik, who is very much reliant on himself and keeps reminding himself that he's working for himself, whereas Luciani is only a product of the people around him, the people he has at his disposal, right? So there's his crew, but then there's also the guards that are compliant with his demands. There's people that he can manipulate on the outside, Malik being one of them, right? And the way that he owns him. But when that all slowly starts to slip away, when he loses his crew, when he loses control of the guards, he realizes he's really nothing, right? So there's like a really good juxtaposition between those two, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah. I agree.
Do you think he's motivated at all by his legacy within the prison, or is he mostly acting on like selfish reasons like power and control?
I don't know. I mean,
the latter.
You think the latter?
I don't think he cares about his legacy in prison. I think he would have much rather have been released or transferred to another prison with the other guys. He values, his tradition quite a bit. Clearly. Right, they're kind of political prisoners. They're nationalists, is what it came off as.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe they're separatists,
yeah, I mean they're Corsican prisoners and not in Corsica, which is why they're treated so poorly. I think I'd agree with you, right? Because he really wants out. He's very upset when he finds out that everyone else is getting a transfer and he's not. So I mean, he doesn't really have some romantic view of his time in prison. But also we don't really get so much context on him. It's like I said, he's a little bit generic and it's a little bit weak in terms of his character. He is what you would expect him to be. So it's kind of hard to answer a question like that when you don't have much to work with.
True. But Malik kind of cares, right, of what happens to the Muslims once he's gone. Because even though his time's almost over in prison, he executes that plan to dethrone Cesar.
Yeah, I think in terms of his identity through Riyadh, he kind of, at least for his remaining term that he has left in prison, he decides that he's going to be part of that Arab faction and work within that means to survive the rest of his days in prison. I don't have much else to say.
Yeah, same.
I think I'm good.
All right, so we will leave it at that. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back next week with another preview and discussion. Peace.
Thanks for listening to this production of The Twice Over. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and sharing it with a friend. Want to see what your tally is? Check out thetwiceover.com. All the movies we've done are listed there, as well as what we're watching for the current week. Follow us at The Twice Over on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where you can leave us any suggestions, feedback, or comments. And if you're about it, you can also support us on Patreon. The music you hear on this podcast is from Amerigo Gazaway. You can find his work on Bandcamp and Spotify.